Raj will take care of it. Anthony Bourdain, you might have seen some of his shows on TV. I know Benny talked about the fact that they watch them in class sometimes. I'm getting a buzzing up here, Raj. I don't know if it's some of the other mics or... Thanks. And his suicide in there, I can't remember, Kate Spade. I didn't know her at all. She was apparently a designer, had a lot of products. 2 high-profile celebrity suicides, one and then the other. And I've talked about suicide a fair amount in a number of my sermons. A couple of years ago, I read this very interesting book on suicide, its history. The Center for Disease Control said that there were 45,000 suicides in the United States in 2016. That made suicide the 10th largest cause of death. And I believe it's the largest, it's now might be the largest cause of death of young people. There are, I looked up some of the statistics, about 3,900 vehicular deaths in 2016, to give you a sense of the relationship between them. On average, you're 10 times more likely to die of your own hand than in a car accident. And you are over 50 times more likely to die of your own hand than in police violence. Whereas police violence and car deaths are things that very much have more attention. Some respond when they hear about suicides in anger. One of the things about, and Forrest, I thought of this when you made your prayer request, death brings trauma. And suicide tends to bring a different level of trauma than other kinds of death. And often when there's a celebrity suicide like this, what it does for a lot of people is rock the assumptions of their world. Because in many ways, there is a deep undercurrent within our culture that says, life is good if you accomplish things. Life is good if you make a lot of money. Life is good if you reach the top of the hierarchies in whatever field you're in. Life is good if everyone knows your name, or you have the partner or partners of your choosing, so on and so forth. And so then when we hear about the death of someone like this, who seemed on television to have exactly the kind of life everyone wants, people stop and say, well, then what am I living for? Because this man had fame, he had money, he was a great chef. We saw pictures of him and video of him going all around the world, eating amazing foods, meeting with celebrities, doing all the kinds of things that everything in this world says, this is the good life. And he ends it at 61 by his own hand. And so then suddenly everyone is wondering, well, depression, mental illness, how can we get a handle on this? What does this mean? This isn't a news story. Leo Tolstoy, if you mention War and Peace, it's basically the image of a large book. But his favorite book of mine is a very tiny book called A Confession that actually chronicles out some of his spiritual meanderings. And Tolstoy, when he reached the pinnacle of fame in Russia as a novelist, now towards the middle-ish end of the 19th century, this is when modern materialism was kind of reaching its first peak. And so he wondered, he said, what is life for? I have fame, I have wealth, I have a family, I have the life I dreamed about having when I was a young man, but he didn't dare go into the barn alone because he thought he might hang himself. And he didn't dare leave a gun around because he thought he might take his own life. And he said, what is life worth? All of my friends think I've risen to the top of the pinnacle, but I'm desperately tempted to take my own life. We're going to talk about David Brooks and his book, The Road to Character, in a moment, but David Brooks borrowed an idea from this rabbi. This rabbi looked at Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, and he looked at the contemporary situation, and he wrote a book about the lonely man of faith. Well, why was he lonely? Because he said, everyone in the world around me are climbing up corporate ladders, and we are celebrating the likes of Steve Jobs and corporate titans. Today it would be Elon Musk or Bezos, who is managing Amazon to the top. And everyone in the world values these individuals. But this rabbi, who was a very famous rabbi, who everyone called the Rab because everyone sought his attention, he said, the man of faith in this culture is lonely because, he didn't say it this way, but the man of faith is an idiot because he's investing in something that this culture finds no value in. And so he said the man of faith is lonely. He's a stranger in modern society, technically speaking. He's living by a doctrine, and he's making choices that the world cannot understand. And as it reflects back on Genesis 1 and 2, and David Brooks picks this up in his book, The Road to Character, he said, Genesis 1 has the man and the woman, and they're given dominion over the earth, and they kind of stand astride this world. But then you get to Genesis 2, and the story changes, and the man begins alone. And there's no animal that's a suitable helpmeet, and then he goes to sleep, and God creates a woman from his side, and he sings a song of exaltation, bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. But then soon you're into Genesis 3, and they're exiled. And so what the rabbi said is Genesis 1 is kind of like the contemporary modern man, who has, in David Brooks' terms, resume virtues. He has worldly accomplishments. He has wealth. He has celebrity. He has power. He has all the things that this world looks at and prizes. He has exactly what these two individuals that took their lives had. And so we look at them and we say, you're on top. We hear whispers from the top of the ladders, from the top of the hierarchies, that there's no there. But if there's no there, why are we stepping on each other to get to the top? And so David Brooks says there's resume virtues and there's eulogy virtues. Because Brooks makes the observation that when you have a funeral, well, who shows up? Well, if you're a celebrity, a lot of people show up, and they kind of have this vicarious mourning. I remember when Diana died, everyone was her best friend, but it's like, how many best friends could she have? She looked like a lonely woman. But at a funeral, people don't stand up and say, well, this is how much money this person made. And maybe they'll make reference to some of their life accomplishments, but when you open the mic up, when people come forward and they say, I was in trouble and this person helped me. I was kicked out of my home and they took me in. And if you know the Bible, suddenly you hear Matthew 25 ringing in your head and say, well, that sounds like the parable of the sheep and the goats. And so Brooks says there's the resume virtues and the eulogy virtues. And for the most part, the world values the resume virtues until people start really looking at their lives and asking, well, what is important? C.S. Lewis, in his book Miracles, makes the comment that we all imagine that God should play fair. And this is what Lewis says, to be frank, we do not at all like the idea of a chosen people. Democrats Democrats, Republicans, but small d Democrats. Democrats by birth and education, we should prefer to think that all nations and individuals start level in the search for God, or even that all religions are equally true. It must be admitted at once that Christianity makes no concessions to this point of view. It does not tell of a human search for God at all, but of something done by God for, to, and about man. And the way in which it is done is selective, undemocratic, to the highest degree. And when we hear this, when we read this, when we hear about this, read this in the Bible, or we hear about it in theology, we're offended and we say, that isn't fair. But what's so strange about this is that the world is full of unfairness. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago Bart Ehrman, who is this biblical scholar who has gotten a fair degree of celebrity and prestige, who is also not a Christian. He rejected Christianity. And in this talk with Sam Harris, Sam Harris is eating up all of Bart Ehrman's ideas about skepticism about a resurrection and the New Testament. And then Bart Ehrman stops and says, but that's not why I'm not a Christian. I'm not a Christian because there's so much suffering in the world, and how could a good God allow so much suffering? And I talked about that a couple of weeks ago, and we noted that it's a funny thing where people feel better if this isn't personal. If there isn't a God, a personal God who knows their name that has brought suffering into this life. If it's a volcano or a tsunami or something of this nature, it feels less than. And many of you remember Brandon. Brandon was here for a number of years, always sat in the front chair, had his sleeves full of tattoos. And one thing he said to me once that always stuck with me. He said, my God kills grandmas and puppies. And I thought, wow, what a poignant way. And of course, you know Brandon. Brandon was almost completely blind. He was losing his hearing, had diabetes, terribly. He was part of a Christian Science church that didn't believe in medical, but he was a boy with diabetes. So, told amazing story of suffering. And once he just says to me, and he's, a Christian, always struggles with his faith, my God kills grandmas and puppies. And yeah. And right there we say, well, what? Lewis makes the point that there's no, if you look at the universe, there's nothing democratic about it. Light years and light years of empty space and this tiny little planet brimming with life and glory. It's not fair. Wonderful people. Forrest, again, someone who's 57 years old. Boom, life is taken away from them. And we say, why? What? It's not fair. Well, just look around. There's not a lot fair about life. And then the Bible, God chooses a people. And if you look at the people God chooses, you might say, I think the last thing you want in life is for God to choose you, because it seems the ones he chooses them to suffer. And Jesus comes as the Son of God, but boy, he didn't get an easy ride. So someone might say, well, maybe God, you go choose somebody else. Don't choose me, because the people you choose suffer. The Bible, when you read it, it's all about relationships. And you begin to wonder, well, do I want these relationships? In the Gospel of John, Jesus is about to be betrayed and turned over to the religious and imperial authorities and to be killed. But before so, he has this meeting with his disciples, and he breaks the bread and he strips down and washes their feet. And then he says this to them: as the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be with you and your joy may be complete. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. For everything that I learned from my Father, I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you, and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit that will last. And so whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. This is my command. Love each other. Jesus changes the conversation and says, friendship is, in some ways, the highest relationship. And we wonder about that. Now, you might be wondering, well, we're in the series in 2 Kings. Why are we reading out of John? And I put this slide up, and you say, and why are we going back to a sermon you preached before Advent and Lent and all of the liturgical calendars that we did for a while? Why are we back with the Shunamite? Well, you'll see in a minute. And why are we talking about friendship? Because the beginning of chapter 8 is this tiny little passage, and I was so tempted to skip over it. But one of the things I've learned in preaching is don't skip over passages, because it's so often the passage you don't want to read is the passage you should pay attention to. And so I was forced to go back to the Shunamite woman, and we'll read this passage in a minute. And it drew me into the fact of this nature of our relationship with God that we both are drawn to and both resist. That God, if you read the Bible, if you look at life in the world, God plays favorites. And you say, well, I don't think he should. Well, and what you begin to see is that on one hand, he's the judge and he's no respecter of persons. So he says, I am an impartial judge, and I will decide between you according to what you do. And that's a stark thing, that if you read the New Testament, all of the stories of Judgment Day are about what you do and don't do. And we think, well, is it salvation by works? No. And then there's this other emphasis that comes through, and it says, I saved my friends. Well, do you play favorites? Yes. Well, how can it be both? Well, that's our problem to struggle with. God doesn't seem to have a problem with it. So let's read the story of this woman. One day Elisha went to Shunam, and a well-to-do woman was there, who urged him to stay for a meal. Now, one of the things that you learn about the Bible is that the Bible can tell stories with amazing economy that will just fill in your world in a minute. Because already you know, first we're telling a story about a woman. And Elisha's a man. And she's a well-to-do woman. So already our imaginations are working on this story. So whenever he came by, he stopped there to eat, because Elisha's traveling, and what the practice was in the ancient Near East, they had a tradition of hospitality, and if someone is outside, you take them in and you give them a place to stay, and you feed them and you take care of your needs. That's what good people did. And so this woman had means, and so he stopped there and he ate, and she fed him. But now we know something else about her. She has a good heart. She said to her husband, I know that this man who often comes our way is a holy man of God. Let's make a small room on the roof, and put in it a bed and a table, a chair and a lamp for him, so he can stay there whenever he comes to us. No quid pro quo, just, this is a man of God. So now what do we know about this woman? Well, she loves God. She's a religious woman. And she offers hospitality, and she wants to pay special attention to this man of God. Well, what does that mean about her? Now we have suspicions. Does that mean she's transactional with God? She's looking to buy her way into God? Well, the story is economical. Let's keep reading. One day when Elisha came, he went up to his room and laid down there. And he said to his servant Gehazi, call the Shunamite. So he called her, and she stood before him. Notice the biblical language. She stood before him. There's status in that language. Elisha said to him, Tell her, you have gone to all this trouble for us. Now what can be done for you? Can we speak on your behalf to the king or the commander of the army? So Elisha says, I have status. Can I do something? Now he mentions the civil status, the monarchy. He doesn't mention God, which is interesting. She replied, I have a home among my own people. In other words, I don't need anything. Thank you. Thank you. So now we know something else about her. She's probably one of these people who feels more comfortable giving than receiving. And you all know these people. Some people, you know, are very comfortable receiving and they don't give. She's one of these people that is very generous. She gives and gives and gives. And sometimes people like that, they're like that for a reason. They've been hurt. They're a little scared. And giving is a way of protecting. Giving is the way that they connect. And so Elisha says, hey, I could do a lot for you. Nope, 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 nope. But Elisha's not going to stop. What could be done for her, Elisha asked. Gehazi said she has no son, and her husband is old. Oh my, now we know a lot more. She's young. She's beautiful. She probably was the treasured girl in the village who had high status because of her beauty, and all of the men wanted her, but here's an older man who had wealth. And so everyone thought, this is exactly the match that any family would want. She's getting married into money. But then she gets married and then tragedy strikes. What's the tragedy? She has no child. Well, now what biblical stories are we thinking about? Abraham and Sarah. Leah and Rachel. The wife who had all the sons, Leah, who her husband didn't love her, so she has all these sons, so she goes up in status. And Rachel, who is beautiful, has no sons, and so she goes down in status. And so Gehazi says, hey, she doesn't have a son. Everyone loves her and looks at her because of her money, but then she's not blessed by God. She probably has a secret sin because God hasn't blessed her with children, yet she's hospitable. All of these things going on in this story. Then Elisha said, call her. And so she called, and she stood in the doorway. Notice before, stood before him. Now she's in the doorway. All these subtle things. About this time next year, Elisha said, notice he doesn't ask her. That's critical. Elisha said, you will hold a son in your arms. No, my Lord. She objected, please, man of God, don't mislead your servant. Now we know a ton about her. She's always longed a son. She's longed for a child. She couldn't have one. Her giving has been an expression of her pain. She is Hannah at the beginning of 1 Samuel. Hannah and Peninnah, remember? Peninnah had many sons. Hannah had none. Elkanah comes to her and says, aren't I worth more than 7 sons? Hannah says, no. Shunamite says, don't raise my expectations. I have adopted a stoic attitude, and I don't expect much from God. I'm going to give to God, but I don't expect to receive. I expect life to be hard and cruel. So please don't muck with the way I have managed my life. But the woman became pregnant. And the next year, about that time, she gave birth to a son, just as Elisha had told her. And the child grew, and one day he went out to his father, who was with the reapers. He said to his father, my head, my head. His father told the servant, carry him to his mother. After the servant had lifted him and carried him to his mother, the boy sat on her lap until noon, and then he died. She went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God. She knows just where to lay him, because that's where the story started. And then she shut the door and went out. And this next bit tells a world about their relationship. She called her husband and said, please send me one of the servants and a donkey so I can get the man of God quickly and return. Why do you go to him today? He asked. It's not the new moon or the Sabbath. That's all right, she said. She saddled the donkey and said to her servant, she doesn't tell her husband. Why? Does this mean that she and Elisha are canoodling? No. She's got different relationships with her husband and with Elisha, and friendships. She is Elisha's friend. And her heart is broken, and she won't even tell her husband. She laid the boy on Elisha's bed, not her husband's bed. She saddled the donkey and said to her servant, "Lead on. Don't slow down for me unless I tell you." And so she set out and came to the man of God at Mount Carmel. When he saw her at a distance, the man of God said to his servant Gehazi, "Look, there's the Shunamite. Run to meet her and ask her, 'Are you all right? Is your husband all right? Is your child all right? Everything is all right,' she says to Gehazi." She won't tell Gehazi. It's this much for her. And you know how she's been dealing with the world. She's put on a face before the world, a face of her beauty, a face of her wealth, a face of her giving. But only Elisha knows her heart. When she reached the man of God at the mountain, she took hold of his feet. That's what you do. Remember Jesus washing the feet of the disciples? The disciples said, "No!" She took a hold of his feet. Gehazi came over to push her away. Remember the disciples pushing the children away from Jesus? Same dynamic. The man of God said, "Leave her alone. She is in bitter distress, but the Lord has hidden it from me and has not told me why." God's in cahoots with the woman. God's in cahoots with her son's death. "Did I ask you for a son, my Lord? I wanted to be in charge of my life. I gave you a bed. I did this for you. You're my friend. And by blessing me back, you set this up. Didn't I tell you, don't raise my hopes?" Elisha said to Gehazi, "Tuck your cloak in your belt, take my staff in your hand, and run. Don't greet anyone you meet, and if anyone greets you, do not answer. Lay my staff on the boy's face. Hurry! Maybe he can be saved." But the child's mother said, "As surely as the Lord lives, and as you live." She brought Elisha into the standard vow. "I will not leave you." In a sense, saying both at the same time, "Elisha, I hate that you gave me a son. Elisha, I trust you." Isn't this how we relate to God? So he got up and followed her. He followed her. Remember, she stood before him before. This is friendship. Gehazi went ahead and laid the staff on the boy's face, but there was no sound or response. So Gehazi went back to meet Elisha and told him, "The boy has not awakened." When Elisha reached the house, there was the boy lying dead on his couch. He went in, shut the door on the two of them, Elisha and Gehazi, and prayed to the Lord. Then he got on the bed and lay on the boy, mouth to mouth, eyes to eyes, hands to hands. He stretched himself out. What is that about? Couldn't God do a miracle at a distance? Yes. What is it? It is substitution. It is Elisha and the boy and the dead body. And Elisha is, in a sense, saying, "My life for his." And the boy's body grew warm. Elisha turned away and walked back and forth into the room, and then got on the bed and stretched out once more. The boy sneezed 7 times and opened his eyes. Elisha summoned Gehazi and said, "Call the Shunamite," and he did. When she came in, he said, "Take your son." What are miracles? Are miracles just demonstrations? Miracles are signs of the age to come. Every time Jesus does a miracle, he opens a tiny little glimpse of what God desires for the world. Feeding the 5,000, walking on water, raising the widow's son. She came in, fell at his feet, bowed to the ground, and she took her son and went out. Culturally, we have elevated romance and resume virtues above friendship. Jesus uses friendship to describe the intimacy of his bonds with his disciples, and he is about to give his life for. The whole of what Jesus offers is friendship with himself and through him with his Father. In a sense, what he says is, join the family. Now to 2 Kings 8. Now Elisha said to the woman whose son he had raised to life, go away with your family and stay for a while, wherever you can, because the Lord has decreed a famine in the land that will last 7 years. Now suddenly we've got echoes of Joseph. The woman proceeded to do as the man of God had said. She and her family went away and stayed in the land of the Philistines 7 years. At the end of 7 years, she came back from the land of the Philistines and went to appeal to the king for her house and her land. Notice who isn't there. Who isn't there? The husband. The husband's dead. He was older. But the famine was coming. And Elisha, he might have told other people, but she's his friend. Go for 7 years. Well, what's that going to cost her? But she goes, and she comes back. And others have moved into the house, maybe the king, we don't know. Just at that time. Just coincidence, right? That's just coincidence, right? There's no miracle here, is there? The king was talking to Gehazi, the servant of the man of God, and said, tell me about all the great things Elisha has done. Now Elisha's famous. Just as Gehazi was telling the king how Elisha had restored the dead to life, the woman whose son Elisha had brought back to life came to appeal to the king for her house and her land. Gehazi said, oh, this is the woman, my lord the king, and this is her son who Elisha restored. Right there, you can see them, you can touch them. It's not just a story, it's true. The king asked the woman about it, and she told him. Then he assigned an official to her case and said to him, give back everything that belonged to her, including all the income from her land from the day she left the country until now. Boy, it's good to have powerful friends, right? It's good to be in the inner group. It's good to have the inside track. Boy, this woman, she had beauty, she had money. God even raised her son. God shouldn't be so partial to them, should he? That's just wrong. Oh, but if you asked her, she'd say, oh, but I have suffered. Well, how do we evaluate suffering? Can we? One of my favorite parables of the Bible, I know some of you don't like my interpretation of it because I've preached on it before. After the great chapter, Luke 15, where there's the lost coin and the lost sheep and the lost son, and this amazing story of the prodigal son, there's Luke 16, which has the most mysterious parable, where Jesus talks about a lazy, embezzling servant who's robbing from his master, and then he gets found out, and he knows the jig is up, but the master hasn't taken the power away yet, so he starts cutting the debts of all the king's debtors, because he thinks, when the king kindly kicks me out, I'll go to these people's house, because they'll be kind towards me. And at the end of it, the master doesn't say, fix the books, kill the man. The master praises the crooked steward. The master praises him for his shrewdness because the steward didn't bank on his own righteousness. He knew he had none, but he banked on the master's righteousness. And Jesus ends it with these verses. The master commended the dishonest manager because he has acted shrewdly. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than the people of the light. I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourself, so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. And you'd say, what? Are you telling me God takes bribes? No. God is saying, don't be an idiot. This world values the resume virtues, but they pass away like the wind. What should you do with your time? Make friends with God. Well, how do I do that? What do I use? Use everything you have. Use your money, use your time, use whatever you have, but seek God out. Make friends with him. Why muddle around in the middle ranges of the hierarchy? We enjoy friendship with God because God enjoys friendship with us. Unlike what the other hierarchies in this world do, with the celebrities and the wealthy and the powerful, God is not bound by time. You want to talk to whatever celebrity you have at the top, stand in line. You want to talk to God? What's stopping you? He's got more time than you have. The Bible says over and over again how he draws near to the humble and how he rejects the proud. No status is your advantage with God, unlike every other hierarchy in the resume virtues. I often say there's two lines in the world. One is to be loved and one is to love. The line to be loved is a mile long. I want to be loved, I want to be loved, I want to be loved, I want to be loved. Do you want to love? There is a world of people looking to be loved. Yeah, but they don't get me anywhere. Now who's mercenary? Jesus says this, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, the one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks the door will be open. Well, what does this mean? Do you want to be friends with God? Be friends with God. Just do it. He's waiting for you. Let's pray. Lord, we spend our lives chasing after what everyone else chases after. We're in a rat race with sharp elbows and we want to climb to the top of the pyramids. And those who get up there look around and say, is there anything here? And then there's the lonely man of faith that says, I'm an idiot in this world. Nobody wants to be God's friend. They want to be friends with Trump or Obama or Beyonce or Tom Brady or LeBron James. But Lord, you are available for friendship from us. And we don't even look for it. And you are at the top of all hierarchies. And we have no status. And you sent your Son to have no status, to be crucified on a shameful tree, abandoned by his friends, mocked by his enemies. And he strips down and washes the feet of his disciples and lets the children come to them. Lord, help us to wake up, pay attention, gain some sense. May we seek you out instead of seeking out the ladders of this world. Hear our prayer. In the name of Jesus, amen. Would you stand?